Hello and welcome to the Romance Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Martin and Morgan Brice. And tonight we are talking about blending romance and paranormal elements. But before we get into all the good spooky stuff, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Nancy.
I'm Nancy Northcott. I write historical fantasy for Falstaff Books, and those novels have a romance subplot in them. And then I independently publish a couple of genres of romance, one of which is paranormal, featuring wizards, demons, and ghouls. And so I get a lot of practice at that.
All right, Melody.
Hello, I'm Melody Johnson. I have my Nightblood series, which is paranormal romance, vampires in New York City with a murder mystery element to it. And then I also have a sci-fi romance series, Love Beyond, and I write some short stories with my anthology. And my short stories and those are all paranormal romance, witches and ghosts.
Very well. Elle.
Hi, I'm Elle Marie Wood. I'm a psychological horror normally, but I've started dipping my toe into writing, psychological horror mixed with sci-fi, mixed with dark romance, and it's been a lot of fun. My short stories are almost exclusively psychological horror, but I do have a new series called The Affinity Saga that I'm on book two. Book 2 actually comes out on the 10th of this month, and that is the series that includes romance with psychological alternate reality sort of elements.
Very good. Janet.
Janet Walden-West, and I write urban fantasy and paranormal and contemporary romance. My latest series is the Region 2 series with lots of shifters and vampires and bad guys.
All right. And I'm Gail Martin and Morgan Brice. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. So I love the guys and the ghosts, and I put them together, and that's a lot of fun for me. Which leads me to the first question: why blend paranormal and romance? Nancy?
Well, adding the paranormal element gives you options for ways to let's say, engineer the romance. People can find things out about each other in a new and different way. They can communicate in new and different ways. And, it makes the fight scenes different in a way that's a lot of fun. So I think the magic in some ways raises the stakes because there's this whole other thing that can be causing problems out there. And so that's for me. I've read a bunch of, I don't write shifters and vampires, but I've read a bunch of really good ones, and it seems like the paranormal elements raise the stakes in those as well.
Okay, Melody.
I would say that a lot of my favorite tropes blend the paranormal with the romance, both in what I read and what I write. I love enemies to lovers. I love slow burn romances, and I love high stakes with danger. And so all of those things with the paranormal element, especially with like my favorite vampires, that all really comes into play with those tropes.
Very well. Elle.
I think that, adding romance, or for me, it's adding romance into the horror element, or the, that is as opposed to the other way around. And adding the romance element was just adding the lived experience, in my estimation. I mean, it's my writing is based in, typically at least based in a current day modern world. So it's identifiable, and that world building is pretty, identifiable to most people. But then, of course, every now and then there's a vampire, right? Why not? And a ghost. But from a psychological horror standpoint, that is all sort of subjective. When I added this romance, or when I decided to try this out, to be honest, it really changed the storytelling, in that I was able to add a different component of life that I had been ignoring before.
Okay, Janet.
I agree with everyone. When you add paranormal, any sort of non-human creature in with humans, you have so much instant conflict. Your outer plot can revolve around their differences, but so can the inner plot. How are these completely separate people, completely separate creatures and societies going to blend? How can you make this love work?
Very good. Yeah, I agree with everybody. And I think for me, I have a penchant for at that 80% where your characters are supposed to have a breakup or have some kind of major tension between them. I like that to be externally influenced instead of often, it's a misunderstanding or something like that that's internal. I prefer it to be external. Like somebody gets kidnapped, somebody gets, hit over the head, somebody gets pushed down the basement stairs, somebody gets possessed by a demon, something like that. I just adds a little, a little spice to the equation. And so for me, I think any story is better with a ghost in it. So I might have a bias that way, but I enjoy having those paranormal elements because that just to me makes any story better. So what is paranormal or supernatural about your characters? What kind of magic or abilities do they have, or how are they different? Nancy?
Well, they're different varieties of wizards, and they're basically two different magic systems, but both groups can wield magic to influence and alter reality and perception. You can glamour yourself invisible. The mages in the Light Mage Wars, the shirtless guys, have a wider range of magic than the people in the historical do. I think that's partly a function of I actually sat down and thought, okay, in this series, what do I need magic to do? Whereas in the historicals, I was thinking, well, this is mainly a quest story. I want to put some magic in it because I'm going to need it to get through this, but it's not, they can't do as many dynamic and fancy things as in the Light Mage Wars. It's a different style of fighting, I guess is what it comes down to.
Okay, Melody.
In my Nightblood series, which is my vampires in New York City, I have a couple tweaks to the traditional vampire lore. So my vampires are kind of like gargoyle looking, instead of being able to transform into a bat. Like traditionally, in Dracula, Dracula transforms into a bat, but my handsome, gorgeous vampires turn into gargoyles. And then also I have what I call the Nightblood element. So not every human can be turned into or should be turned into a vampire. So only humans that have Nightblood, which vampires can tell by their taste and their smell who should and should not be turned. And so a Nightblood human can be successfully turned into a vampire. But if you're just a regular old human that is not a Nightblood, if you were to be turned or attempted to turn it into a vampire, you basically turn into like a zombie mindless vampire. So it's going on a feeding rampage. So I had a lot of fun playing with that on why would you want to turn someone into a raging vampire, let alone maybe create your own army of raging mindless vampires. So that was a lot of fun.
All right. Elle.
So I tried my hand at this a while ago. I don't know that I was going full on romance when I did it. I wrote The Promise Keeper, and it was about, there were, I don't want to call it erotic scenes, but I mean, perhaps, perhaps. I don't think I have a better definition for it than that. But she's the vampire and she doesn't want to be one, right? And so she's still sort of entrenched in her life that she no longer has, but she's still trying to interact in that way. And so she's having romantic engagements with humans, and she's having, then she's just, her entire involvement is really based within her being this immortal being and then still living a human's life. When she finally gets the opportunity to interact with another immortal, it's her enemy. So she doesn't want to be involved with this. She's either trying to run or trying to kill. So it was a lot of fun playing around there. And I think that's where I said, oh, I should try that again, and see what I can do with it. And this time with the what I'm calling the Affinity Saga, in the Tryst, the romantic element is a little bit more part of the story, because the story is filled with science fiction, with horror, very slightly actually with horror, and with these romantic elements, but with psychological elements more so than scary elements, because they don't necessarily know what's happening to them. It gets scary as we go in the saga, further books further down, but they don't know what's going on. They just know that they've fallen in love, and it's this pull that they can't seem to shake at all, which in and of itself becomes frightening for them, because I like to stick with the psychological piece of it. So it becomes frightening for them to realize that they're actually not in control of what's happening. And that's, the horror then ensues.
Cool. Jana?
I've played around with regular urban fantasy with, your magic wielders and, people who turn into animals, werewolves. But I've had the most fun with one that leans a little bit more speculative fiction. You have your hunters who police these monsters, and out of them, the worst are vampires. And these vampires are created by a virus. And of course, vampires are targeting the hunters. Let's first of all thin out our enemies' ranks and then bring them over, so we can gain whatever, information we have on them, on their system, on their bases and everything. And the other creatures, some are good, some are bad, but they're born that way. You have, like Wendigos, and your were creatures are based on like normal mammal groups or reptile groups. So that has been a lot of fun, and playing around with different things, new things that would actually kill these new kinds of creatures if you had to combat them.
All right. Yeah, and my folks, I have 6 different series as Morgan Brice, and the abilities are a little bit different in each one. In a couple of series, we've got somebody who's a psychic who gets visions, but of course, they never get the whole picture. They only get pieces of it. Some people who are mediums who can talk to ghosts with varying degree of ability. We've got some who are psychometric, who can touch an object and know the history and the magic of it, or the curse on it by touching it. And those are the main 3 magics, but I've got another series where the characters have a small bit of magic, and so they harness it with small but useful spells. They can't do anything huge and splashy like, blowing up a building, but they could light a candle without a match. They could grip a padlock and unlock it. They could accelerate a stone and have it hit much harder than they could throw it. So they have to work for that, and they have to practice, but it comes in handy to be able to do very small but useful practical magic. And it's kind of fun watching them have to learn that. And sometimes it doesn't work the way they'd like it to. And we've got Jeannie joining us. And there she is. Hey, Jeannie.
Hey.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you write.
Well, I'm Jeanne Adams, and belatedly with computer problems. I write paranormal romantic suspense, urban fantasy, and space adventure with my friend Nancy Northcott.
Okay. And we were just talking about what abilities your characters have.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I've got some witches who have sort of a different range of paranormal powers. In my urban fantasy, both power from being connected with aliens and also witch power. And then, just a lot of paranormal sort of witchy things.
Okay. Witchy things. We've got that.
Yeah.
So do you think that the presence of magic or some kind of supernatural ability, some kind of paranormal talent, does that make it easier or harder to fall in love? And why? Nancy?
Well, I think Janet made a really good point earlier, where you have different species of people, essentially, and that can lead to conflict that has to be resolved. And for my light mages, there are rules about revealing the fact that you have magical abilities to someone who's not magical. And the hero of Embattled Mage fell in love years ago with a woman who doesn't believe in what she refers to as woo-woo. Not only does she not believe in it, she detests it. And so that's kind of a problem for them. It was a problem for them a decade ago. it's a problem for them now that circumstances have reunited them. So it's a second chance at love story, but it's also a story of accepting differences and how do you lead somebody to accept the differences that you have, especially when they're tied to something that person really doesn't like. I mean, it's the typical romance thing, right? Make your hero or heroine fall in love with the most unsuitable person possible. So I think it leads to a lot of good potential for conflict. Sometimes using magic together creates an affinity that becomes a springboard for exploring other feelings. So in some cases, it makes it easier. It just, I think, kind of depends on how you choose to use it.
Very good. Melody.
So I think that it definitely makes it harder for characters to fall in love, but it makes it more delicious for us to write. All that wonderful tension. So for example, in my Witchy Business series, which is the short stories that I write, in the first one, my main character is a witch and she has to go to her ex-boyfriend's house to help excise a ghost from his house. And he calls her because he knows he had never believed in ghosts before. And until this ghost was haunting his house, and knew that she would be the only person who would believe him and could help him with the ghost. So he grudgingly had to call her. But back in the day, they broke up because her cat had died. And he didn't understand why that was such a huge deal, that she just couldn't get over it. She wouldn't go on dates with him. But that was her like medium. So now that he like understood that, they could, you know, go along and, you know, finally start bridging gaps that they had back in the day. But it adds that, as a writer, it adds that element of, you know, taking conflict to a whole new level that you wouldn't be able to do in contemporary.
Very good. Elle.
I agree with Melody. I think you just hit the nail on the head. And from my perspective, of course, I'm taking it darker. That's just what's going to happen. It doesn't work out well for my poor vampire. Love just does not work out for her. And but it was fun writing it. It was fun trying to get her there, but she didn't get there and she couldn't. Really, when you look at the story, it's great to watch her try. But, you know, I think that what happens is that tension, like you mentioned. I think the tension is what, from a horror writer's perspective, coming into romance and saying, oh, wow, look what goes on here. You know, the tension is what strikes me most as the thing that keeps people coming back to the books, because there's so much you can do. There's so many ways to create this tension. There's so many ways to make it be resolved. And that's the place where we can stretch our legs as writers, because we get to, you know, put our characters through these sort of horrible emotional, you know, stresses, and then, you know, depending upon what you're writing, either make it all better at the end or not. So
Okay. Jeannie.
Well, I'll just pile on there a little bit. I think one of the great things about it is it does add another layer to the already complex issues that any couple faces of getting together. You've got all the normal stuff you have to overcome, baggage, emotional issues, ex-lovers and boyfriends and girlfriends and things of that nature. So you already have that baseline of baggage that most adults have to bring to a relationship story. And as Elle says, for good or ill, whether it works out or it doesn't, the fact that you even try is a triumph. But then you add the paranormal to that, and you have belief and disbelief, or you have people who have different powers or come from different traditions. It just adds another layer of complexity, which, as Melody says, is part of the fun for those of us who are writing it, because it's like, oh, what can I throw at them now? Ooh. As Nancy's stories go, ghouls, yes, more complexity. You don't believe in any of it? Oh boy, let me show you this. So you thought you didn't believe. Oh boy, have I got a show for you. I just think it adds a layer of complexity and as Melody said, deliciousness that lets you bring you deeper into a story, but it also adds a level of otherness and difference. And I think one thing we as writers are always trying to strive to do, or striving to do, not trying to strive, striving, is to help people understand that everybody is relatable. Everybody deserves love. Everybody is relationship material, whether that's this time or the next time, or you learn something from this one, and that nobody is so other that they can't be loved. I don't know
Okay.
that. Maybe that's just me.
Great.
How about you, Janet?
I completely agree with Jeannie. I mean, on one hand, adding the paranormal, of course, makes it more difficult because you have one group, you know, their entire purpose is to kill everyone else that's other. So if, you know, a weird creature and a human hunter fall in love, you have problems with, you know, their hierarchies. You know, if you're a government group, you're going to be going against that. You're going to have to sneak around. The other one is going to have to, you know, sneak around their pack and do this. If it's someone who is human and has been turned into a vampire, not only are they going to have to worry about how the people that were their friends or maybe lovers will react to them, they also have to learn to accept themselves now that they have changed so much, and the way that their attitudes have changed since they are now one of the others. So it adds all of that delicious angst.
Yeah, it's fun to see them work through it. In my Witchbane series, the one character has some of that magical ability, but he also knows about the paranormal out there, and he's tracking a dark warlock. The guy he falls in love with is the warlock's next intended victim, and he doesn't believe in any of this magic supernatural crap. And so it's very hard for Seth to save his life because Evan thinks Seth is crazy and is running off, you know, trying to get away from him when Seth's just trying to keep him alive. And it takes a while for Evan to figure out that, oops, you know, this stuff is real, and they're after him. In some of the other series, like in Badlands, we've got a guy who's a psychic medium. He's cool with his power. But the skeptical homicide detective once tried to believe in something that was paranormal, and it lost him his job. He got in a lot of trouble for it. So he's just sworn off any of that woo-woo stuff until he can't find a serial killer, and decides as a last resort to go to this psychic. And that it takes him a while to get over, to believe that what Simon can do is real, and also to accept that in somebody that he wants to get close to. That takes most of the book. And then in other cases, you've got people who each know they have a supernatural ability, but they don't tell people. So both people are worried that if the other character ever found out their secret, they wouldn't want them anymore, but they both have the same secret, and it takes a while, of course, to get to that. And I'm sure we'll find other variations of that, but those alone just bring a whole new layer, as Jeannie was saying, to the books, because it's one more thing that you can use for them to explore getting to know each other and getting to accept each other. So that's a lot of fun. Now, if you had a paranormal or supernatural ability, what would you want and why?
Oh, gosh.
Nancy?
It's a hard one. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to fly like Superman, and that would be really cool. And come to think of it, none of my mages and wizards can do that. I wonder why I didn't just give that to them, you know, vicarious living and all that. Some of my favorite stories are telepathy stories. And in the series Jeannie and I write together, I have a core of telepaths who work within the government and others who are not employed that way, because I love playing with telepathy. Two of my favorite comic book romances, Jean Grey and Scott Summers and Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad, are telepath romances with the telepathy only on actually the female end. So it's really, really hard, but I think probably I would still go with magic, because telepathy, you have to work awfully hard not to eavesdrop on people. I mean, that's really rude. And so you don't want to be doing that. And if you're flying and you get distracted up in the air and you don't have Superman's invulnerability and you crash into the ground, boy, you're in trouble. So I think I'd go with magic on balance.
Okay. How about you, Melody?
I think I want to be a shifter. I love the romance shifter books, like that pack mentality. I love having found family. I love that idea. But I think I would want to be a dragon shifter. I want to be able to fly and breathe fire, and I don't want to be like beholden to like the moon or anything. I want to be able to shift on my terms.
That sounds like a good plan. Elle?
I don't know. I've never thought about this before, actually. Gee, I don't know. Like I think the idea of stopping time would be pretty cool. But, you know, like, of course, I'm thinking of a heist book now, because I'm like, you would stop, you know, and then go rob the bank, come out, leave, and then they can start again. I think that that's kind of what, and it keeps coming back as I was thinking of this. So maybe that's what I want to do, is like stop time, like literally just, okay, that sounds great. What was
Well,
that?
you were saying you're very busy with your kids' commitments. You could go to the soccer game, stop time, have a couple of hours to yourself to get everything done, and then start the time back up again.
And I haven't missed anything at all. Yes, that would be great. I think I like this. Yes. I think I want to stop time.
Here we go. Jeannie.
Well, as some of you may know, I've been traveling a lot, not necessarily by choice or by fun. So I think teletransportation would be my, right at this moment in time, I would be like all in for that. Just be like, okay, I want to be there right now. Okay, there I'm in. Okay, good.
This is good. As long as the poofing also takes your clothes with you, otherwise it's all right.
Yes, yeah. That's a little sketchy otherwise.
Yeah. Janet?
I think time travel would be a lot of fun. You could, go back and check historical facts for yourself, watch civilizations rise, find out, who really was on that grassy knoll. I think that would be amazing.
All right. Ever since I was a little kid and watched Bewitched, I wanted Samantha Stevens' little nose twitching power. Dirty dishes, twitch your nose. Need to vacuum, twitch your nose. Life would be so good if I could just twitch my nose and it would be done, whatever it was. So I'm sticking with nose twitching like Samantha Stevens.
I think I like that
formatting.
Yeah. The book, twitch the nose. Yeah. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. So what kind of paranormal romance or paranormal elements haven't you done yet that you think maybe you'd like to try? Nancy?
Well, I used to always say I was not going to write a ghost. And then there are ghosts that figure prominently all through the board. I see you, Jeannie. They're all through the Board King books. So I don't know. It's I've never written a vampire story because I don't feel like I have anything to bring to it. And that's the same reason I haven't written a shifter story. I just don't, it doesn't call to me. But the Regency didn't call to me until I wrote The Steel Rose and discovered that I could put in a magical artifact and ghosts and a curse and battles. And so, there might be something out there that calls me to write one of those, but I'm not averse to it if I had a good idea. So I guess I'll pick shifters or vampires. Okay.
Melody.
I would love to try my hand at a zombie romance. I'm always watching zombie shows. So like iZombie, the movie Zombieland, the newest one that just came out, The Last of Us, which is based on a video game, which is an amazing story. And although, the traditional zombies are very like slimy, mindless, brain eating creatures, there's slight tweaks that you can make and definitely turn it into a romance. That would be a lot of fun. Another type of undead.
Okay. Elle.
That actually sounds interesting, Melody. I'd read that. I just, just to see how you did it. I've never done magic. It's just, I'm coming from a whole different genre, so I never even thought about like adding any true magic to something. And I think it's kind of neat. I mean, I think that, okay, a spell with a zombie, but that's, like real like magic. I think that's kind of interesting, and I might want to try my hand at that.
Cool. Jeannie?
Well, I've not done shifters and I've not done post-apocalyptic. So I'm thinking I might like to do post-apocalyptic shifter book at some point. And y'all don't even get me started on another idea because I don't need any more ideas. I've got so many I need to write now. So
I have
stop.
a post-apocalyptic book. It can be done. How about you, Janet?
I think I would like to try out demons at some point. There's a lot of rich ground there. You could go outside of your typical, Christian idea of demons. Other cultures, are they really damned souls, or are these just like good guys who are misunderstood? There's a lot of room for nuance there.
Okay. I've done shifters and I just did one with a ghost romance. But as much as I love vampires, I've never had a vampire as a main character in a romance. So in fact, I was kind of going counter trend by having a vampire who is definitely not going to ever be anybody's main character in a romance. And he has his reasons. But I have always loved vampires ever since Barnabas Collins. So I might do a vampire in a romance. I think that would be fun. I have not done a zombie romance either. And if you could do that without losing any important parts, it would be fun. So
That'd be part of the tension.
I'm so curious.
Which part's going to fall off next?
So are there any paranormal romances that you read that made you think, gee, I want to write one of these? And if so, what inspired you? Nancy?
Well, it wasn't so much paranormal romances as growing up reading science fiction and fantasy all the time. And I was reading romance. And about the time I got into writing romance, Lynn Kurland published Stardust of Yesterday, which pretty much created the paranormal romance genre. It won the Maggie. I think it may have won the Rita for best first book. It's a phenomenal book. The hero's a ghost. I mean, how in the world are you going to fix that? But she did. And so I don't think that's a spoiler since it says romance on the spine. We know it has to be fixed somewhere. So I don't know that it was that so much as it was just getting into enjoying writing romance and then seeing that you actually could put these elements into a romance, because naturally in the way of publishing houses, when Lynn Kurland's book took off, everyone else scrambled to do books, with paranormal elements in it. So I think it was just a matter of timing for me.
Okay. Melody.
Paranormal romance was the first book that made me realize, or the first genre that made me realize that I actually like to read. I grew up, my parents didn't read that much, and I did have a lot of friends who read for fun. And then my one friend dragged me to the library for a book sale, and I happened to pick up Dark Fever by Karen Marie Moning, and realized that, oh my gosh, that there's a murder investigation paired with paranormal, paired with going to Ireland. And it was like everything I wanted to do with my whole life in high school. Finding love, go to Ireland, and be sucked into a murder investigation. So, and then after that, it was history between Laurel K. Hamilton and Chloe Neal and Sherilyn Kenyon and Maggie Shane. And I just went down the rabbit hole of every paranormal author I could gobble up.
All right. Please, Elle.
Okay, this happens all the time. It's
I
fine.
know.
I should just put my whole name up here. Elle Marie Wood, Lisa Wood, just pick one. Either doesn't matter. So for me, it wasn't that I read any paranormal romance. I hadn't actually, unless you consider Twilight, the Twilight series, a paranormal romance, which I'm starting to think maybe, right? It has to be. So I read that. But that wasn't, none of that said, oh, write this. I just had been, I've been writing for a long time. And so when you get to a certain point, you're like, let's do something different. Let's try something new. I just don't want to keep doing the same old thing. And I just decided to see what would happen if I added romance. It was almost like I could have just put something in here's a subgenre, pick one out of the bag and try that. It just so happened that that's the way it went. And I had a lot of fun with it. I think I just, because the element is not, it's just an element. There's still this driving story, but there's romance too. You know what I mean? So it wasn't this thing that took over the story, at least for me. And that was exciting that I could actually make that happen and not lose the psychological horror elements that I really need to have in place for it to be my book. So I guess I can, if I'm going to name a book that I read, it would be the Twilight series. And I did read them. I saw the movies. I did get dragged to the movies at midnight to get in there. And I don't know what we were doing. I mean, I don't know why we had to see it at midnight, but we did. Honestly, I was there for it.
It was necessary.
You know, I guess it was, because I did do it twice too. I didn't do it for the third movie, but I absolutely did do it twice. I'm just like, I don't know, I've done it again, whatever, it's fine. And I actually enjoyed the books, I enjoyed the movies, you know, so I see the draw, I absolutely do. And now that I've sat down and started writing something that's along those lines, I keep thinking, yeah, this is kind of fun to play with, you know, storylines like this. So I've enjoyed myself doing it, but it wasn't born from, this is the book that did it. It was, let's try something different.
Very, very valid. Jeannie?
I think mine was from reading stories that I wished had more romance in them. From Dracula to, you know, you read Dracula and you're like, okay, so who loses here? All the women lose, right? All the women, they're completely screwed, right? And so I didn't like that. How would I change that? So I wanted more from that. And then I read the library I grew up with was like stuck in the 50s and 60s. It's like they didn't buy any new books ever. And so I read the Witch World series, the Andre Norton Witch World series. And the romance in that is extremely matter of fact. They're like, these two are together for the entire book. And at the end, they're like, yeah, I like you. You like me. Okay. So then the rest of the series, they're together. And I'm like, but I wanted to see that part. So I started looking for more books where they actually gave me that. And I think in some ways it was more the vacuum that sucked me into romance than it was actually reading one that went, oh yes, I love this. It was like, well, and Phantom of the Opera and some of these others, you're like, really? You couldn't have made this happily ever after. You just had to end it there. So, yeah.
That makes sense. Janet?
I think Jean and I had the same small town libraries growing up. The only thing close to paranormal in mine were, you know, like high fantasy. So when I found Charles DeLint and Charlene Harris at about the same time, that just blew my mind. The way that they both could so seamlessly combine, you know, the modern day world and pop culture, and then elements of mythology and urban legends, that just opened up so many different avenues.
Well, you know, my first favorite TV show was Dark Shadows with Barnabas Collins as the doomed but heroic vampire. And there was an unrequited love there with the doctor who was trying to cure him. So, you know, I guess I started early. I also liked Charlene Harris's Sookie Stackhouse series and Laura K. Hamilton's work and Sherilyn Kenyon's work. And then I started reading a whole lot of fan fiction / and move over to the other side and started reading a lot of male romance by people like Jordan Hawk and Pandora Pine, and said, this is just too much fun. I've got to be in on it. So that was sort of how I came to the table and said, this is fun. I've been doing low-key romance, mostly adventure. Let's step this up a little bit and see what we can do with it. So that was fun. Well, folks, we have blown through our time. So it is now the chance for a lightning round to go around and tell everybody where they can find you online. And if you have something new, recent, or upcoming, what you've got coming out. Nancy?
My website is nancynorthcott.com. I spend more time on Twitter than is probably good for me. And I'm at Nancy Northcott there. And I'm very proud of myself because today, as we figure this out, I figured out how to apply my actual name to my Instagram account. So I'm now Nancy Northcott author on Instagram instead of Nancy N and some numbers. So this is much better. So I'll be posting on Instagram by the time you actually see this. My latest release was Warrior Mage, which is the 5th book in the Light Mage Wars series. I always have to stop and think about it. You'd think I would know. And then I have a novella in that series coming out called Magic and Murder at the end of March.
Okay, Melody.
You can find me online at my website, authormelodyjohnson.com. I'm on all various social medias, probably most active on Facebook and Instagram. And my newest book just came out in January called Sight Beyond the Sun. And it's the second book in my sci-fi romance series.
Okay, Elle.
I'm Elmarie Wood. You can find me at elmariewood.com, Twitter at elmariewood, the number 1, and Facebook at just Elmarie Wood. My most recent book is part 2 or book 2 of this Affinity saga that we've been talking about today. It is called Origins, and it's a lot of fun. I tell you, I just had a great time writing it because, again, it was trying something new and adding some romance, and that was a neat combo for me.
Okay, Jeannie.
We've brought Elle over to the
Yes, we
side
have.
that has cookies. You can find me at jeanneadams.com. You can find me here on Continual a lot, and you can find me on the Hive of Scum and Villainy that is Twitter and Instagram. Everything is Jeanne Adams except Instagram, which is JPA Griffin. So
That works. Janet.
You can find me everywhere as Janet Walden-West, website, TikTok, Instagram. I hang out on Twitter the most, and my newest toy is a Facebook readers group, Janet Walden-West, Advanced Cryptid Recon Agents, and the 4th book in my series will be out this summer.
All right. I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbrice.com. As long as you spell the name right, names right, you can find me on just about every social media platform. Of course, I'm also here quite a bit on panels with Continual. My latest novella as Morgan Brice is Light My Way Home, which does have a ghost romance. And the next one is Peacemaker, the first book in the new Sharks in Springfield series, which is a lot like Wild-West if Jim and Artie were together, and they're supernatural Secret Service agents. But most of the time you can find me here on Continual. So thank you all for being wonderful, wonderful panelists. And thank you for watching and listening. There will be more romance coming up on Continual. So we'll see you online.